Welcome to the Meaningful Work Matters podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Soren, founder of Eudaimonic by Design. On this podcast, we'll dive into the world of meaningful work, explore its complexities, and examine its impact on people and the organizations they're a part of. Each episode features insightful conversations with cutting-edge experts who are successfully navigating the challenges of meaningful work. We hope to offer you ideas, frameworks, and tools to unlock potential and design work that's fulfilling, impactful, and supports everyone's well-being. Subscribe or follow us now, and let's make meaningful work matter. This is Andrew Soren, and today on Meaningful Work Matters, I'm joined by Petra Kipfelsberger, Associate Professor in Leadership at BI Norwegian Business School. In this episode, we explore how leaders can inspire their teams by authentically sharing their why and fostering meaning through clear communication and connection. Petra explains the balance leaders need to strike, offering meaning without actions that kill it, like setting random deadlines or ignoring contributions. She shares research on how inspiring meaning early in the tenure of a relationship between a leader and a team member can drive engagement and loyalty for years. We also dive into why family businesses create better employee experiences, and then explore Viktor Frankl's timeless insights on meaning and self-transcendence in leadership. Petra offers practical strategies that help leaders integrate big picture vision with the realities of daily work, all while staying true to their values. Join us for an inspiring and evidence-based conversation. Petra Kipfelsberger, it is wonderful to have you on Meaningful Work Matters. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for inviting me.
This conversation is going to be diving into the world of meaningful work and visionary leadership, and what meaningful work is all about. I suspect we're going to get into some of the work that you've done on Viktor Frankl in your career. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm really excited for us to dive into. But maybe before we do, I can ask you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what makes your work meaningful.
So my name is Petra Kipfelsberger. I'm an associate professor in leadership at BI Norwegian Business School in Oslo. And I think that my work is quite meaningful because I can really build nice relationships with so many different people, like with my colleagues here, with my students, with managers, with participants in the class. And it's all about like living and nurturing these relationships, but also then helping others to grow, like having deep reflective thought, room for and space for reflection, and helping people sometimes to see something different. So this is what really is a deep meaning for me, to help people see things different and to grow personally. And I also feel that listening, like being able to listening to other perspectives, and also to you now today, and learning from others is a quite source of my own meaningfulness. And of course, in research, there's a lot about like really curiosity and this whole thing about discovering new things and developing new thoughts and then following up on that. That was really so meaningful in the whole portfolio of being a professor, because this is a really, I think, a rich job in terms of enriching and having very different sources of meaningfulness.
I agree. There's all sorts of goodness in there. Thank you. Why don't we dive into some of your research? And so maybe let's just start with, can you tell us a little bit about what visionary leadership is?
So the whole story about visionary leadership and meaningfulness started when we discussed, like, so many are thinking that leaders are the ones who make meaning and are the ones who should infuse meaningfulness into the work of others. This is a big claim in the overall research on leadership. But the question is if this is the case or is it not, because there's another stream saying that leaders can't do so. Leaders might be meaning killers, like the ones who really harm the meaningfulness of their followers if they try to infuse it. It all started with the saying of, you cannot give what you don't have. And so the whole story started really there when we thought, okay, how should leaders be able to give something if they don't experience their own work as meaningful? And so we looked upon, like, how is the level of meaningfulness among CEOs, among top managers? Do they really think that their work is meaningful, and how does this affect their leadership behavior? So we started there, found out that there are some variations, that some CEOs have more inner fulfillment and more meaning, where others are also having like an average level, but not fully high. And then we tried to see how does this affect then their level of inspiration, of their level of how they communicate about their own work, but also about the organization. And this is where we started to look very deeply into visionary leadership, because this type of leadership is the very form where you have it combined, the communication part with the inspiration, where really the words of the leaders matter. Then we elaborated more on this, saying that if the leaders have found like their more meaning in their own work, they talk differently. Their rhetoric is different. Their overall communication, their level of inspiration when they are talking. Because you could also assume that, okay, if you have learned that visionary leadership is so crucial, you could then also like think of, okay, then let's just do a visionary leadership training. But I think there one has to be very careful, because of course you can, to a certain limit or level, bring the visionary leadership level up if you do visionary leadership training. But it might not be for sure the same in the daily life then, if you feel that, oh yeah, like if the leader is giving a big speech or like making this broad announcements, then this person seems very inspirational and very, oh yeah, this is something bigger that we all should believe in. But if it's like really deeply seated within the leader, then the daily communications will also be different. They will be more positive, more idealized. And this will come up and up again, like the level of inspiration in the overall leadership behavior. And there, the closest measurement where we could see the closest leadership style connected to this is so far called visionary leadership. Brackets here, maybe we could also develop like an even more specific part on that, because also some visionary leadership also got some critique on that it's mixing up some effects, or that the inspirational part is already like included. And so we knew about these weaknesses, but nevertheless, since we were looking for an established measurement to test that in multi-level field studies, we decided to go for visionary leadership. But we could also think of, in terms of future-oriented research endeavors, to have this even more specific, namely in their daily measurement of like how do they really communicate? How often do they really reinforce the positive aspects?
So a huge part of this is all about what makes an average person who is just working feel like their job as leader is meaningful. And a key ingredient here is whether or not my manager or whether or not my leader feels like their job is meaningful, or whether they have a sense of meaning. If they do, then they have the capacity to be able to communicate that. They have the capacity to be able to inspire me. And yes, I could just train somebody on how to inspire people when they speak. But I suppose it comes down to authenticity, which is something we'll probably be talking a whole lot more about over the course of this podcast. If that's not actually core to the leader's kind of day to day, there's some sort of a disconnect or incongruence between kind of what that leader is saying and how they're being or how they're showing up, that I guess is probably potentially obvious. Is that accurate?
That's very good.
And this kind of visionary leadership model, there's many models. There's transformational leadership or transactional leadership. There's LMX. There's all sorts of ways that academics try to pin down what is leadership, what is a leadership model, a servant leadership, authentic leadership. There's so many different versions of this. You found that there are specific behaviors associated with visionary leadership that seem to make a difference. So what are some of those behaviors? What are some of the things that visionary leaders seem to be doing differently?
Thank you for mentioning also transformational, transactional, and all the others, because in the first study we did, we controlled for all these other behaviors to really see whether it's really about visionary leadership. Because like as we measured it in these studies, it was one sub-dimension of transformational leadership. because transformational leadership is the broader construct, which has like the role modeling and the intellectual stimulation and the individualized support consideration also in it. And we then like really distilled this one component of visionary leadership, which really makes the difference. And also we controlled for leader-member exchange, because you could also argue that, oh yeah, it's all about the relationship. No, it's about the communication. It's about the words the leaders are using. And this is the core behavior, illustrating or exemplifying the thoughts, the vision in broader terms, in a broader image that is really like attractive, first of all, for the leader, him or herself. And then, in best case, the followers can connect to that. But it might also happen that for some followers, this might not be the case. Also, the leader is really inspirational and doing a great job. Nevertheless, it's not a full guarantee that it will really trickle down until the last follower. So it can also be if you have different values, or if like if you don't believe in the words or in this overall vision or in the contribution you would make, you think, oh, this is but not so worthwhile for myself. Then still you could think of, oh yeah, but this doesn't help my own meaningfulness to increase. So like what I used to say is here that leaders can make these wonderful offerings. They can offer you an anchor, like where you could think of, oh yeah, this is the broader picture. Like this is, oh yeah, I can see it now. But like whether you buy in and whether you think, oh yeah, this is also something for me as a follower. I really want to contribute. I'm convinced by it. I really are passionate about this contributing to this vision. That's like the second part of the model, where we see that it really comes from the leaders to this behavior, like offering something, an anchor where you can see a connection or not. And then if you see, it pays off and it contributes. But if you don't see the connection, then it might not have like really reached you. And this is also then a possibility which is still there. But overall, in the two studies we did, and we did like measure this like from the leader level of the top managers, CEOs, to the middle managers, and from the middle managers to the non-managerial supervisors, we could see that in both hierarchical levels, it's the leadership behavior which is most important for supporting work meaningfulness at the lower level. But still, there is no 100% guarantee that every follower really, really will have this buy-in there and can really make a strong connection. But this is the strongest we could find in terms of how this really is distributed and where like leaders can be helping to increase the meaningfulness. Like in the claim, like leaders as meaning makers somehow, I would rather say leaders as meaning persons of offering meaningfulness. Like I would not say that they really make up the meaning. They are having some accounts, some thoughts, some anchors where they offer something in terms of an idea, a bigger contribution, and then the follower can think of whether, oh, this is something for me or not.
So it seems like a really interesting distinction to just make sure that we shine a spotlight on this recognition that a leader cannot or is not making meaning for somebody else. The meaning is inherent to the individual. The individual has to make their own meaning. The leader has the opportunity to offer something that the follower can try to do something with.
Exactly, to have this offering. It's not about that you can really make the meaning, because I think if you would try to do so, you would rather harm it. And we have another conceptual paper written on this, that leaders try too hard, or like killing me softly with his or her song, title of this paper. Yeah, it might override then like the opinions and the views of the employees. Like if the leader, just imagine if the leader is so singing loud, like really being so like more in the centrum and not making it as an offering, but rather as a, oh, this is now obliged to, or this is the only thing we believe in and it's too narrow, then it can really be harmful and reduce the followers' overall work meaningfulness.
Mm.
And so I really tried to make it a really intense discussion on both sides, because I also can strongly see that leaders can really become and be and are in some places, unfortunately, meaning killers. Like, this is, of
Mm.
course, a hard term, being a meaning killer.
We like the dark side of meaning on this podcast, all the complexities. So yeah, tell us about meaning killing.
I think, like, in my understanding, more often than meaning like on the positive side. So I think
Mm.
when I start like also training leaders on that, I think then always a message is to say, hey, just avoid all of this. Try
Mm.
not become to be a meaning killer. Just be aware of what features, which conditions are really harmful. And if you have tried now to avoid all of this, what can you do in addition to really strengthen the meaningfulness level, which is already there in your team, to have like to really bring it to the next level, or to have this overall broader thinking and meaningfulness, and also the feeling of being in a community, being part of something bigger in terms of this team. Start with avoiding the negative.
I want to just keep going in the direction of meaning killing for a moment, because I mean it makes me think of in the context of positive psychology, there's a lot of critique about this idea of toxic positivity. People latch on to this idea of, oh, I want to create more positive energy, more positive emotion, more engagement, more whatever in my organization, and therefore I'm going to relentlessly focus on the positive, and
Mm.
very quickly that becomes what becomes known as toxic positivity, or sometimes cruel optimism, depending on the context. There's all sorts of places where that can go. And I haven't heard people talk about that from a meaning perspective, but of course it makes sense. So can you tell us a little bit more about what does what's happening when a leader is killing meaning? What are the things that they're doing? What's the impact on people?
Mm, mm. Yeah, so like quite a practical example. We have also done a very short video clip on this to illustrate what can happen. Just imagine you have been given a task by your leader saying that you really need to fulfill this offer by a certain deadline, and you're working very hard on it, and you are just in time, and you have brought all your ideas into it, send it to your leader, and never get a reaction, never get any appreciation on that, never get feedback. And even if you then by spontaneously run into your manager, ask about, did you get this offer I just sent to you, which you asked me for? And the manager would then say, hey, which offer? So this would really, really be very hard for the employee then, to feel so less recognition, so less appreciation, no feedback, no. This is really harmful in terms of like how to destroy meaningfulness. Do it like this.
Hmm.
Give tasks. And I think also like a key takeaway there always is for the managers to see, like if there's a random deadline chosen by the managers just to enforce that you are doing and stay engaged, that's not cool. That's really not helpful. So deadlines need a cause. Deadlines need a why behind. So why is it so important that I send it at this time to you? Okay, because then you will really look into that and give me immediate, or somehow I don't need the full feedback immediately, but it would be so nice to just get the confirmation. Yes, I got it. Thank you for making it on time, or anything. Like having this close relationship where you feel immediately there is some recognition. It doesn't have to be a big reward, but some of reaction. And I think it's so much in daily business where we are so much driven by time pressure and deadlines and like just busyness and do a lot of things. That's, of course, the manager has also a lot on his table to handle. But then if he really urges people to do that to certain deadlines and does not then appreciate that they made it, then it's really like it is very demotivating and kills their meaning. They really thought they could contribute to a wonderful offer to win this next customer or whatever. And then the manager hasn't read about it, doesn't even remember that he was given this task to this person. That's really, really hard then on a personal level, but also on a like on the objective, on the topic level.
if you're listening to this and you're curious to hear more about this topic, there's another episode on this podcast that Zach Mercurio did probably a few months ago. If you're listening to this now, that was talking about mattering, and he was talking about anti-mattering, and there's definitely a huge relationship. Now let's go to the start with why, which is I assume borrowing from Simon Sinek, and what Simon Sinek is probably borrowing from many others, namely Viktor Frankl, who we will get to in a little bit. But what are managers who are starting with why doing? Like what? So if you've got the great example of the here are the things that kill meaning,
Yeah.
what are the things that managers who start with why doing?
They should really start of thinking, okay, let's assume I'm new as a leader in this role, or I got a new team member, or even a full new team. It's so important what we found out that visionary leadership, the timing also matters. So it's crucial that you think about, hey, when do I bring like my visionary thinking? And the important thing is bring it rather in the beginning. And now the interesting thing for us also was to see that the beginning is rather long in such dyadic relationship. So we found out, like in the two studies, one it was 5 years, in the other one it was 6 years. So it's up until 6 years. It's a steady decline. So highest impact of visionary leadership on the followers, on your team, on your new team member is in the first years, which can last until 6 years, which is a long period already. But if I would like think through that, that means that also in the very beginnings or even in the selection process, I could then open up and tell a little bit about my own meaningfulness and my own inspiration, my own visions, where I think I would like to have this person work with me together on this. This can really help. And when I like hired in very early years, also students, I also tried to let them know, like, where is my thinking going, in which direction, where do I see my contribution, and also where can I see like the other people, the other person just joining our team to contribute in our team.
Mm.
And if there is a good match, then it's super helpful.
I have a clarifying question. I think this is really useful to just even think about the time period and the time horizon where this meaning making or meaning offering, and really on both parts. I mean, you are talking about a dialogue here where it's manager offering and also manager listening, very much so around kind of what is meaningful and creating a relationship, and that stretches 5, potentially 6 years in before it starts to, I guess, have a half-life, or it really starts to diminish. Is it one thing that I hear in that is like, should we be switching managers every 6 years? Like, is that or like should should a CEO have a 6-year tenure before which kind of often happens, like in the major corporations that I've worked in, CEOs generally tend to have a 5 to 7 year tenure before they change, and I'm just starting to make a connection here that I'm curious whether you see
It's
in the
hard to
relationship.
say from just two data sets whether this would be really the case. But I think what's happening, like how we theorized about it, is that after some years in the organization and with the same leader, you have found your own sources of meaningfulness, more or less. And you have
Mm,
seen and proven like whether and how much this visionary thinking and this inspiration really made sense or has already translated into parts of your new reality, shared realities, because you have reached some big milestones together. And I think then after some like these 5, 6 years, you may have other sources where you think or you're more stabilized in your own evaluation of what are you doing here in this organization within this team, and how much meaning do you derive from it. And I think this really stabilizes, and therefore the direct leader might not have so much influence anymore. So this was
mm,
our theory behind where we thought, yeah, this really makes sense, because in the beginning you really search for directions. You really want to know, where could I contribute? Where is the organization going? Where is our team going? And you really want to have this, like if you're a person like like me, you really want to understand what is the bigger picture. But then after some time, you might have internalized it. And then you are not so open to all kind of inputs anymore, because then you already could see how much you live in accordance to the visionary thinking. So it really translates then to reality, to your daily behavior. But it's also an interesting observation you are sharing, like that, saying that some CEOs after 5, 6, 7 years, like there's a turnover. And and this would also then mean, like, if a new person comes in, then the visionary part becomes even again here more
More
important, because then
important.
you really want to know how this person now thinks and what's her or his vision. Where could we go now together?
One of the things that just automatically implies is how important onboarding is, or in this, this first tranche of years. I mean, extending onboarding beyond the what we often think of as like a 3 or a 6 month, the first 90 days. No, this is potentially the first 6 years of onboarding, but how important that meaning offering becomes in that early period of time.
Exactly. And it can really have an impact. I remember when I was an intern at Siemens and watched the video of the global, like the one CEO for 400,000 employees back then with Siemens. I was really so fascinated by his way of thinking and by the vision. And I felt, oh, and now as an intern, I'm part of this whole journey. I felt so welcomed. Also, it was just virtual, but this film was made so well that I still remember this moment where I was sitting there and really like has goosebumps here to, cool, I'm excited, I'm part of it now. So it really has an impact, I think. And like, this is also why I was working then in the Siemens team on the onboarding process so much for 2 years, where we got to do it like in an e-learning program with more than 10,000 users per year. So they really got, like, or Siemens were, I think, a pioneer on that. And so I think many more companies could think of how to really make the very first moments, but also the very first years so exciting and meaningful through visionary messages.
What is in it for the organization if they increase the meaning of people, especially in those early days?
There's a lot in it. I mean, like, the level of meaningfulness has been found to be the most important contributor to the level of engagement. It's also the one important driver of, if you don't find meaning, you are much more likely to leave. And also, if you think about, like, the generation just joining the workforce, they are really also now at the lookout. Hey, does this company has values, and does this contribute to something bigger? I really are passionate and want to join it because of this perfect fit. So I think, like, in terms of purpose, in terms of meaning communication, it has become it has always been important, but I think it has become even more important nowadays, where we have a lot of flexibility and a lot of choices where people can make. And they are looking for those where they think, oh, this really matters to me. And so companies are building upon that, but we also know that some are doing more just the, like, greenwashing or whitewashing or whatever, like, where you can see this is just more a marketing campaign. And when it's not lived, then I think, you have the big mismatch, and you might experience a high turnover rate, because then you have a lot of disappointed and disillusioned employees who just feel, oh, this is not real. And so they are not really engaged, or do, like, what we all know, like quiet quitting or mental resignation. They are not fully into that. And of course, we also know from large scale service that this also happens.
So we know it's important. We know meaning, generally increases performance and motivation and loyalty and commitment to organizations and all of those things. I'm interested in the family-run businesses side of things. I think it's interesting that you chose to study family-run businesses. So I'm curious, why did that become an important cohort that you were studying, and what, if anything, what did you learn about those who run family-run businesses and this work relative to others?
Yeah. I think family-run businesses are quite important for many economies. And we looked into Germany in this data, but also in Norway, why there would be huge potential in looking into family-run businesses. And we were just curious whether there are differences, whether it's a family business or not, and whether like the CEO or like the real top managers there, whether their behavior really matters and how this would affect like the employees working there. And our overall research question where it all started was, are people more satisfied if they are working for a family business, or are they less satisfied? So are there any like guiding structures for if you would be just finished your studies and would be on the lookout where you could make a big contribution? Because of course, family businesses make a big contribution to overall economies. So, or would you rather look for a big international global company? And so we started there and had a wonderful data set to look into to make us like see also empirically what are the differences. And we found that in family businesses, the overall employee satisfaction is higher. And then, of course, the question was, why is this the case? Is it just because they feel more family, or what is different? And we figured out that the affective tone, the affective climate is different there. There is more positivity lift. And it's because this spills over from the family, from the CEOs, like because they might be more like really passionate about their own business for sure, and can communicate that even more authentically. And this then spill over to their teams, to their workforce, and help them to have a more satisfaction in their overall work.
You seen any relationship between founder-driven organizations and family-driven organizations? Because I just even as you're talking about why you think a family-driven business might have a deeper connection, probably a stronger why as to why we're doing this, I would imagine it's similar for founder-driven companies.
I think like what makes a family business so interesting is that you have like the history, you have a full legacy already where you're stepping in,
Mm,
because I know that there is also a lot of research on like succession planning and how to hand it over to the next generation. And so you have like the whole background. If you think about a startup, of course you have this passionate founder team or a founder where a lot of passion, but you lack this history.
yes.
It's very fresh, and of course it can grow to something very big and special and fascinating. But we also know that like a founder story can also have like the other side, like the failure story, and that's also natural. And so I think in terms of stability, and like a successful family business has this already the history and the legacy. And
Hmm.
so we also try to control for this phenomenon, because it's not just that you're so proud because of the history, but rather like, it's really something within the team that they are now transmitting to their people.
Yeah, and as I think about that, I'm in North America in the context of indigenous perspectives here. There's this notion of seven generations, which is when I'm making any decision, am I thinking, am I looking back, in the generations behind me? Am I thinking forward to the generations that the decision will impact? When you're talking about a family business, you are literally thinking generational. What have I inherited? But also, what will I provide to the future? Do I want my grandkids to be able to work here? Which has a very different significance than any other context that I can imagine, and also changes the time frame upon which you are making decisions. So, in my experience working with family businesses, one of the things that is often true is that there's often, because of also the way that family businesses are literally structured, which is often not associated on bought and sold on the stock market. Um, family businesses have a different kind of time horizon. I'm much less concerned with the quarter than I am with these kind of longer term decisions. And that has a huge impact on the way that I think about people, the way that I think about well-being, the way that I think about all of the ways in which I'm supporting an organization.
Fully agree. That makes a difference. And I think this is the crucial difference in terms of the founder.
Let's change gears completely
Mhm.
and talk about Viktor Frankl. We've identified what leaders who are offering meaning are doing in terms of their visionary leadership tendencies and what they do when they kill meaning. We've talked about why it's important in terms of what those outcomes are. Now I'm kind of curious to think about, how they actually become those kinds of leaders. And you're an expert on Viktor Frankl. I know that you've read like what, 70 of Frankl's books and like written your graduate work on it and written a whole entire book, which I haven't read because it's not in English yet. But
Exactly.
tell us a little bit about who Viktor Frankl is, because he's kind of the father of all of this work in a 20th century context.
For me, it has become a role model. And even some terms and words were not in his writing, like resilience and like some terms we are so used to use now, he didn't use, but like a lot of foundation he has already given to us by his books. And I'm so fascinated, like how he lived his life, how he produced what he produced, and with what clarity, and also like this complexity he had in his overall philosophy and also therapeutic approach. Because like when I run into his literature and read so much, like some books I read 3 times or so, because I was really like fascinated by the dialogues he had written up, like where he could have a huge impact on people's way of thinking, of people's way of seeing their own lives, and where he could really be the meaning changer, I would call him somehow. He could
Hmm.
change a whole life by changing one's perspective, thinking differently, and at some point in one dialogue, right? And this
Hmm.
is what really fascinated me so strongly, and where I see a close connection between his work, which of course he has all this clinical background as well, and but what I did in my very early like years, as you mentioned, and during my study time, like for my master's thesis, to cut out all the clinical elements and to bring it to the business context, and in particularly to business coaching.
And before you go there, let me just take a step back and
Yeah.
and for if you're listening to this and you don't know who Viktor Frankl is, we're talking about a psychiatrist in the early 20th century, a Jew who was ultimately a survivor of the Holocaust, was in concentration camps, ultimately. Coming out of concentration camps, wound up publishing and writing about what that experience was like, which was one of the things that made him so famous. Man's Search for Meaning, probably one of the most seminal works in the whole entire kind of perspective of what is meaning, what is existential psychology, how do we think about why anything is important, and the father of what became something called logotherapy, which is an entire kind of way of thinking about the relationship between meaning and our psychology and the way that we think from a clinical perspective. But obviously, you're taking it out of the clinical context into a broader business context. What did I miss in terms of just the basics that people need to know about Frankl before we dive in?
Very well put. I think also with Man's Search for Meaning, I think his like famous thing is that he established the human need for meaning. And he thought in this like context in life, meaning that every person, every human is really searching for his or her own meaningfulness in life. And I think there is where it all started, also with meaningful work. And of course, we know many researchers who are having this intersection of meaning in life, meaning in work. And this, for some, it might seem so abstract and so broad, but he also managed then to bring it quite down to the daily life, like by saying that think of any situation and then think about what is the thing how you should respond in this particular situation. And this is what I really like so much about him, because on the one hand, he was so opening up and making it very big and this basic human need. And on the other hand, he also managed to give us ideas of how practically and how small, because it's really on a daily basis. It's not about, you should not, like, of course, you have this big why, but also you need to think about this. Okay, but what's now the why in this moment? He had really this thinking of in the moment and what is now needed from me to do. What is the world asking me now to do? And I really like so much that he was not thinking like going out, like just to think, what can I contribute? But rather, what I'm asked now in this situation to do, to contribute. Like he turns somehow very nicely their perspective and helps people to not overthink, I think, but to rather think, okay, I'm now in this situation. So what is the world now expecting from me, or what is now expected from me to do in this situation, which adds meaning to my life or to someone else? And I think the most important term he also introduced and had a very intense also conversation and a change on Maslow's pyramid of needs. And this is also where I'm so feel like quite ambassador of this, because it really changed. Maslow changed his pyramid based on Viktor Frankl's insights. So the top of the pyramid, and by the way, Maslow has never drawn a pyramid. This was all constructed later. But the very top of the needs of basic human needs is self-transcendence and not self-realization. And so Frankl did a whole story about how we need to find a reason beyond ourselves, like contributing, loving someone, helping someone, that gives us the opportunity of being self-transcendent, being beyond our own self. And this, as a byproduct, will help us to realize our potential and our strengths. And I really like so much this thinking, and I've tried and somehow sometimes succeeded and sometimes not to bring that to also a broader audience in terms of class participants and so on, because it's not so easy to talk about these concepts and about this thinking, oh, it's not about me, it's about giving to others. And then this will help me find meaning as a byproduct. But also what he said was, if you search for meaning, you might not find it, because you need to see in which situation you are, and there you need to see the meaning and respond accordingly. Here's so many nice ways of thinking and twisting it around, what I really like. And I think he's still underestimated. Also, I know, and Andrea, I'm so happy that you're saying, oh yeah, we are all familiar and meaningful. Yeah, for sure. But nevertheless, in terms of Freud and Adler, Viktor Frankl is still, I think, the gem we really, it's so worthwhile to look into his life, into his legacy, because it's so rich. There's so much in his writing, in his thinking. And I'm still think that I also need to sit down next year again to bring that more to the management and to the business level, and to have more what does this mean also practically in terms of leadership.
So let's go there, because I think that what you're describing is so profound, in that and even just within the context of meaningful work, one of the things that I struggle with so much is that our definition of meaningful work, the most common definition, Pratt and Ashworth's definition of meaningful work as work that is personally significant and worthwhile, still anchors it in a me. I mean, it still makes it, I mean, to use Maslow, about self-actualization, as opposed to a sense of we, or a collective responsibility, or a sense of otherness, a sense of my role is to actually serve a broader population, or a broader planet, or just a bigger scope than me. Right.
Right.
The problem with the triangle in Maslow is there's only room for one person at the top of a triangle. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, which is why the triangle doesn't even work. The idea that this expansiveness is actually what we go to at the final level is something so interesting. So how does that relate to business? What's your connection?
Yeah, first of all, that's a very good observation what you just shared. And how this connects to business, that's a good question. And I think still there we have a lot to work on, this exact point what you just made about this overall relatedness and this feeling, the connectivity of everything. That if you think about beyond oneself, to think, if I can help there, then we are together on this. And I think you're picture you just draw in my head, saying that the pyramid is already flawed because it's just room for one person, I think there could be a starting point to think broader and I would not suggest to twist the pyramid because then it's also not stable and but to think about how this connectivity and how the relational needs we also have for sure. But also I think Frankl was mentioning this a lot, but didn't use the term relational need or relational connectedness, because when he was saying and talking about self-transcendence, he mentioned so much it's then about like another reason, someone else or another thing you are serving or you are doing something good. And this already tells a lot about his thinking that there is something beyond. And then, like, as I say, as a byproduct, it comes back. And I think if business would be able to understand this dynamic also in terms of sustainability, in terms of climate, in terms of so many things, it could really help change our thinking of course, it's about agency, it's about myself. I also want to contribute. But then it's like this connectivity, it's like, yeah, we know from trees that they also communicate. And to think about like humans, that we are also connected at a deeper level and that everything affects and has effects on other. And that like this domino effect or trickle down or like ever trickle up, or I don't know, like that it really spreads, can help us to see the overall responsibility for, I think, then collective transcendence, or like this more, above a single human, to really think about we as humans, we as persons in business, what can we do to help the world, to help others, to make like something very, very deeply meaningful for the next generations to come, for the planet, and so on. Like, and there, I think Frankl could also, like going back to his original writing and thinking, could really enrich our own thinking and assumptions we are making, and also add a lot more meaning into it.
And of course, just to connect this portion of the conversation back to how we started this podcast, what you're describing, that capacity to communicate the bigger picture, to be able to communicate the big picture why, but also the micro why of this particular moment, is probably what we mean by visionary leadership, is probably what we mean by the capacity to communicate that in very authentic ways, that help someone find their own pathway into those whys that are that offering that the visionary leader is able to make. And so tell like, what would Viktor Frankl say to a leader who is striving to try to figure out how to do this?
I think to anchor the leader first by him or herself, start like quite micro, but then try to find this broader connection. Try to feel it, try to embrace it, to see where do I feel this strong connection? Where do my heart go, I would say. I mean, Viktor Frankl was quite working a lot with cognition and I think with mental ideas. But I think he also has this idea of that it's so important what do our feelings tell us. And if we feel this connectivity and the leader is able to feel not only a good connection to like a self-relationship, but also this relationship to the organization, to the broader context, to the environment, to the society, where do I see these bridges and these connections? And then how do I feel that? How do I feel about it? Make it very authentic, and then find ways how you can communicate and bridge like these worlds. And I think a crucial part is also then exactly what you were just mentioning, to have both parts integrated, to have this very broad, but also then bring it down to a very pragmatic and practical parts. Because I think there is a myth of, or like people can also be overwhelmed by such a big why that they don't know what is then my role, or how can I contribute? Like, oh yeah, the climate is, oh my goodness, that's so big. I don't know, that's too big for me. And to help then, and Viktor Frankl would then quite concretely say, think about your own situation. What is expected from you, from the world, to do in this matter now? Like he's very concrete in terms of timing. It's always the now, very centered or focused on the moment, the mattering moment, because in the present you can change something. And then really have this in the moment and have maybe ambassadors, followers, like you don't need to do it all alone, but think about making connections with others so that you can strengthen your own impact.
There's so much more that we could say. So, if people want to learn more about all of this extraordinary capacity to build more authenticity, what's the best way for them to do so?
I think then to also start about like reading in terms of reading, they could read the paper on authentic development, where we also had done it quite practically to emphasize that coaching can help. That if you are thinking for your own now and we sparked your interest of, oh, what could then be my meaning, or I need a sparrings partner to discuss or to think through, we could see that coaching formats like building this reflective space of having people reflect deeply on their own meaning, on their own, oh yeah, what does the universe ask me to do now, can help to have a conversation, a dialogue. And Viktor Frankl's work was also quite dialogical. Like he was, of course, communicating in books, but he was working as a therapist in practice. So this means really see how you communicate, see how you can also inspire someone by just a little question. So like, what is your bigger vision? Or like just a leader here in my department just ask us to think as broad as you can. That's really, I thought, very encouraging to hear about saying and helping people to, oh yeah, let's think very like in ideal terms, in such positive light, because this can really like help to unpack the resources. And this would be like my tip of like be sensitive with your own communication, and this is also then about your own limitations. Focus on like also now from I would like let me put it like this: focus on the positive, but think about if you're bringing a not like a negation. Know that the brain cannot handle the no. So if you are telling yourself a lot about no, 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 try to formulate it in positive frames and words. This is not just from positive psychology, but this is also really from the studies we know about how our brain works, to think that this can help enrich your life, but also the life of others. These broad resource-oriented questions we use a lot in coaching, like what would be the nicest thing which could happen right now? And this can be so impactful. And I think this was already my favorite question. What would be the loveliest, the biggest, the brightest, the nicest thing which could happen now? And you can ask that for yourself too. Like, of course, you can ask the other person, which can enlighten their day. But it can also help your day to bring more light into your day immediately, because this might like help you to look up and looking up like a broader horizon, have a broader vision. What would be the nicest thing right now? And for me, of course, it's the nicest thing that I have been invited to this wonderful talk with Andrew. And this can really help also to think for yourself. And it's beyond Christmas presents and wishes, like because it can be, of course, very immaterial. What would be the nicest thing? And already if you have this thought, you might start to smile. And this already can affect a lot, because if you are able to smile, like Andrew is just doing to me, to other people, this is so heartwarming and so helpful, especially in rather dark times, which we are having now in Norway. So think about positive questions for yourself and for your others in terms of which really unpack and make your resources available. Broad thinking, and broad thinking leads to broad communication.
What a gift, Petra. I really appreciate the simplicity of that task. It's not easy. It's not simple to be able to do, but there is an elegance of just recognizing that those kinds of questions, those appreciative questions, to use the idea of appreciative inquiry, of looking back and celebrating, of looking forward and imagining, of using that to reflect on what can I do right now, is so powerful. It's so powerful to create a wave of positive contagion. Wow.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Wow, what a deep connection. I mean,
Mm,
we are so many miles away, but I feel it was so wonderful and it felt so close.
mm.
Thank you. You are such a good listener.
Thank you, Petra. You're such a good offerer. Uh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Petra.
Thank you so much. It was my great pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Meaningful Work Matters. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And if this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to leave us a review. Your feedback helps us make this podcast better and reach more listeners. You can connect with me, Andrew Soren, on LinkedIn, or visit www.eubd.ca to learn more about Eudaimonic by Design. Finally, if what you heard today spoke to you, tell your colleagues and people in your community about our podcast. We really appreciate your support in making meaningful work matter. See you next time.